Oh man, I just ran up the stairs.
I did that to you before. I was like, oh, I'm going to be late.
I'm out of breath. Oh my God.
You're out of breath. Yeah.
I'm so out of shape. Good Lord. All right. You ready to do this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Before we jump into the normal stuff today, I want to give a shout out to Anetta for leaving some awesome feedback for Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. Don't forget, if you get the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book, you can use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy. Then leave some honest feedback. You'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book. Use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. This week's episode is brought to you by the UX Playbook. Do you feel lost in your UX career journey? Well, let the UX Playbook be your roadmap to success. Handcrafted by my buddy Chris Wynn for UX designers just like you. These bundles offer comprehensive guides on everything from UX fundamentals to portfolio creation to nailing your job search. It's packed with hundreds of videos and Notion guides with real-world examples, pro tips, and exclusive bonuses. And all that makes UX Playbook your one-stop shop to elevate your career. And because I know this will be a game changer for you, I've partnered with Chris to get everybody listening 10% off their Fast Track bundle if you use the code BEYOND when you check out. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the code BEYOND and save yourself nearly $25. Don't wait. Get your UX journey back on track with the UX Playbook and transform your career from fuzzy to focused. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are regular here, you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. Apple loves those things, and so do I. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, and Michelle for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're released. And you can get instant access to the video archives for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then for the love of God, tell your mom and them. Now, a lot of you out there are career shifters. You could be doing any number of things. Some may be design related. Some may not be related to design at all. So today I am excited to have maybe one of the most successful career shifters that I know, Emilie Mazurek, on the show. And we're going to talk all about her experiences, and she's going to offer up some advice to all you out there career shifting, some do's, some don'ts, some tips, some tricks, and all that stuff. Emilie is a senior UX designer with a background in biochemistry and hospitality. And after graduating boot camp, she landed a full-time remote role in less than 3 months and was promoted to senior designer in just over a year. Now she's helping others to do the same thing. And when she's not working, you can find her arguing with her parrot, Cheeto, giving unsolicited hot chocolate reviews, or finding any excuse possible to book another vacation. That sounds like a lot of fun. Emilie, I'm so excited to have you on. How's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so excited to have you on. One of the reasons, like I said, I think you may be like one of the most successful career shifters in the UX field that I know of.
I'm blushing over here.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I mean, you've done quite well for yourself over the last couple of years. So I'm so excited to have you on. All right. So Emilie, before we get into our conversation today, I want to give a little plug for our LinkedIn Live event that we're going to do next week. So if you're listening to this the week the episode airs, this is going to be out on Tuesday, May 21st. The following week, Emilie and I will be hanging out live. It'll be Thursday, May 30th at noon Eastern. We'll be live on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and Instagram. And we're going to be answering any questions that people might have about career shifting and anything else, I guess. Emilie, do you have anything specific that you'd like people to ask about? Do you have any questions that you'd like to have people ask you on that live event?
Oh, whatever's top of mind. Like, I'm always happy to chat, like career shifting. Like, I have a lot of experience career shifting, and it's fairly recent for me. So yeah, whatever you want to bring to the table, if you want to send questions ahead of time, like totally open to that as well.
All right, perfect. So make sure you keep an eye out. I'll send out some emails and I'll post about that on LinkedIn. And you can also check out beyonduxdesign.com/events for details on how to join live. There's also a form on that page where you can get your questions in early. You can also ask your questions the day of and when we're live. And you can even watch all the previous live events that we've had on there too. at beyonduxdesign.com/events. Those are all posted on that events page. Awesome. Looking forward to that. You've got such an interesting backstory, biochemistry to UX design and all that stuff. I love hearing your story. So why don't you tell everybody listening a little bit like about your backstory and how'd you end up getting into UX design?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to be a doctor, and I was wrong. Well, basically, I went to university.
You just knew it.
I just knew it. I had this idea from a young age, right? But I studied biochemistry in university because that would be the best idea to get into medical school. Wrote the MCAT
Kinda have to,
twice,
I guess.
scored competitively the second time, worked in a microbiology lab because I knew that would look really good on a resume. And I even volunteered abroad, moved to Guatemala so that I could work at a medical clinic there.
Oh, wow.
Because, it's kind of hard to find somewhere that wants to have somebody volunteer that doesn't have a lot of medical experience in a medical facility.
Yeah, it's very much different than UX design.
A little different. Yeah. Anyways, I did all of those things because I wanted to be the most competitive applicant. And looking back, it wasn't really because I was super passionate about it. It was something that I thought that I should do. I wanted to achieve something and kind of prove something to myself, right? So yeah, I was applying for medical school and recognized that I was probably going to get a spot. And I was terrified that I would get the spot rather than actually get rejected. And it was kind of like, okay, probably can't ignore these red flags anymore. It might be time to face the music. So I knew a little bit about UX, but I actually kind of discovered it more in depth through career counseling. So I did the program all about, self-discovery, learning about what would really be valuable for me in a career. And web designer, I think, came up as one of the top picks that could be a good fit. And I was like, oh, web designer. That's kind of similar to
okay.
UX.
Yeah.
Started doing some more research and I'm like, oh, this really plays to my strengths as a scientist. It's analytical, data informed. There's a lot of experimentation, but there's also this creative problem solving component to it as well. And that's actually what I really loved about hospitality. I worked in the hospitality industry for almost a decade. And it's, solving people's problems on a daily basis. It's never the same.
Yeah,
Getting to
seriously.
meet a wide variety of people. So it kind of all came together. And that's when I decided to go to a boot camp. 3 months later, had my degree. I'm a professional now, as they say. Probably not, but close enough. And I was able to get a job fairly quickly afterwards. I was very fortunate. So yeah, I've been working full time since then in the industry.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that. Yeah. So that it's really interesting because both of those seem totally different, right? Biochemistry, science, hospitality. But when you think about UX design, one of the things that I find fascinating is there is obviously that problem solving piece. There's that like sort of being agile and being able, not when I say agile, I don't mean like, 2-week sprints. I mean, being able to flex and change on a whim and do what you need to do to solve that problem then and there, which is very much like hospitality when, and I've done episodes about this too, where we talked about that explicitly, but you're the face of the company. You're the face of the restaurant, the hotel, wherever you work. And like, you have to figure out how to solve that person's problem right now. Which is very similar, I think, to dealing with UX. But then also on the biochemistry side, you've got the science, you got the experimentation, the testing, the hypotheses, and validating or not, right? And figuring out if you're right or wrong. So it's like it's interesting, like those two things mesh so well, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting for me too.
I'm curious, like from your perspective, is that something you realized going into it, or is that something that like maybe took you a little while to kind of come to that realization? I'm curious how that happened.
No, totally the opposite. I was like nervous because I was in boot camp with like graphic designers. Like the deliverables they were producing were like beautiful. And I'm looking at mine and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Like my visual design skills are so poor. And like, I'm not even close to that level. Like, how am I going to compete with those people? Right. And it actually took until I landed my first role. It was very surprising to me. I got to the final round and they picked me. They're like, yeah, we actually picked you over someone with 5 years of experience because we wanted somebody comfortable running experiments because I was going to be on the growth squad.
Wow,
I was like,
okay.
oh, maybe my background's a lot more relevant than I initially gave it credit for. So that has been very interesting to reflect back and realize.
It's funny. That's like kind of one of those things like we talk about imposter syndrome a lot, right? And one of the things that I think is important, and I want to talk about this a little bit, this confidence gap, right? Like this idea that you're career shifting, you're starting over, you have no idea what you're doing. I've never done this before, blah, blah, blah. I'm curious, like overcoming some of that. I want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, some of the things you ran into as we think about the confidence gap and how you overcame them and how you kind of got past it. Built a bridge over the gap, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So the first thing is like, okay, so I graduate boot camp and then I'm not going to classes the next day. And now what, right? Like, okay, I guess I'm applying for jobs. I'm going to like events. I'm networking, whatever that means. It was very isolating in a way. And I know it's probably not designed to be that way, but like I'm applying for jobs. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm working on my portfolio. Like, does it meet the standard? I'm not sure. So, a couple different ways in which I tried to overcome this. The first was actually meeting with a couple of my colleagues from the program. And we first met like on a weekly basis. And then it was kind of like bi-weekly, and then it was monthly. And now we just catch up periodically. But we checked in, hey, how's your progress going this week? Like, oh, you got an interview. Like, how did that go? What questions did they ask you? It's like, oh, I just had this job application and it really sucked. And that was great to be able to just like vent with people that understood exactly what you were going through. And, actually really valuable as well, because you could see as time went on the progress that we were all making. So you could finally put like,
All right.
you could see like legitimately like, oh, okay, we're making the right steps. We're seeing progress. So that really helped.
One of the things I'm kind of curious about is like we tend to have when I think about imposter syndrome, right? We tend to like underestimate our abilities. And it was just like in your example, they saw your background in science as an asset. And that was something that maybe you didn't make that connection. And I'm curious, like something that I think is super helpful is when you have like a mentor, an advocate, and I'm not talking about just like somebody you found on ADP list. I mean, like somebody that actually knows you and your skill set and can actually coach and guide you. I'm just curious, was that something like you had or didn't have, or maybe you found later, but somebody who was able to kind of look at your background and say, hey, look, the hospitality, the science, like this goes together, blah, blah, blah. Because I feel like that's often something a lot of people are missing, because when they think mentor, they go ADP list and they say, review my portfolio. And they consider that a mentor relationship, which I don't consider that a mentor relationship at all. I'm curious, is that something that happened for you, or maybe that's something you found later?
It's definitely something I found later, I would say. Like, I was doing the ADP list route because I needed feedback. I needed to know, like, hey, how's my portfolio? Like, what changes should I make? Is it up to the level you would expect? Like, how am I doing right now? I needed someone to guide me a little bit. But those sessions do tend to be like fleeting and kind of one-off from my experience. And you don't really build that relationship where someone would actually know me and my strengths. I had a mentor, I would use the term loosely, like during my boot camp, but was actually a student that had just graduated from the previous cohort. So, like, to her credit, she was phenomenal and very supportive, but not exactly like a UX expert. So that came much later. And it's actually funny, like, my mentor now, I met him on LinkedIn. And not through the traditional path. It wasn't me like reaching out, like, I need a mentor. Will you accept me?
Will you
like
be
how
my
people
mentor?
think
Yeah.
that it is. Yeah, it wasn't like that at all. Like, I had a LinkedIn post and he wrote something like stupid and sarcastic on it. And I was like, well, I'm going to write back something like equally as sarcastic back. We just had this banter. It was like obvious that like we would get along. So we chatted. And from there, like the relationship kind of grew organically. But looking back, I really wish that I would have had somebody to kind of be like, hey, these skills are really valuable. Like, and you might not realize this, but like, this is exactly what people are looking for. So yeah, hugely helpful if somebody could have mentioned that maybe a little sooner.
We were talking a couple months ago. I can't remember when it was, month, week. All the days seem to go together for me now. But we were talking, and you mentioned something about the importance of having a cheerleader. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, because I love that idea. It's like sometimes it's like, yeah, you need someone to like kind of have some tough love, but at the same time, sometimes you need someone to just like, be positive and like help you get past like some kind of emotional glut that you're in or something like that. I'm curious, like you talk a little bit about that and that idea of like a cheerleader, finding a cheerleader, or maybe like you mentioned, even being your own cheerleader if you can't find anybody. I'm curious, how'd you find that when you were going through your switch?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that. Like when I was going through my own switch, I felt like I kind of had to be my own cheerleader because it was kind of like this unknown. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did know from my career counseling that this would be a good fit for me. And I had confidence in that. Like a professional that I had paid money for, whose job is to find like a great career for me, said that I would be ideal in this. So like I had that going for me, which really did help boost my confidence, especially when there was times of doubt. Even, applying for my boot camp, I actually got rejected from the boot camp before I was like permitted to start. They told me that my, application wasn't up to standard.
What?
And I had
I've
the
never heard of
confidence.
that.
I know.
That's
Shocking, right? Because I'm the best designer ever. No.
Well, I'm just surprised they wouldn't take someone's money. I mean, that's
What I was thinking too. I was like, hello, like, can we look at the price point here? Like, they're going to turn that down. I think the cohort was already very full and they wanted to move me to the following cohort. They offered me this special limited time deal that they never offered to anybody else. Yeah, a bunch of crap, right? But I had the confidence to speak up and be like, hey, what's wrong with my assignment? Why isn't it up to standards? Did you make a mistake? probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do that if I didn't already believe that I would be great in this role. So that's a huge privilege and advantage I had going into this. On the flip side, now looking back and acting as a mentor to a lot of people trying to break into the industry, the biggest thing that I see is really this lack of confidence. And I meet so many talented and amazing people that I know will be a great fit for this role. And they just don't really see it in themselves, not yet, because the market's so competitive and there's so many people gunning for the roles. And how do you stand out? And really, like a lot of people, what they actually just need is someone to be like, hey, you can do this. Like the work you did is awesome. Like, really nice job on that. Like, your past is really relevant, like you were just mentioning, right? So I totally see the value now. After the fact, obviously a lot more than when I was going through it.
And I think it's just worth noting here, like sometimes it could be maybe it could go too far and you get toxic positivity where you're being overly positive and overly optimistic when you might not have the skill set. But I think this is the importance of finding a trusted mentor who can be honest and say, I honestly believe that you've got this versus saying, I don't think you have this, but I'm going to tell you and just like, inflate your ego anyways. I think that's like, again, the importance of though, finding a trusted mentor that will be honest with you, either positively or negative. Like if they have to be like critique or have to be critical of certain things and say like, look, I think you have potential, but you have to improve these things. So anyway, I don't know. That's something I feel like when people go on, it's so hard to get that though, when you go on like something like an ADP list, and I'm calling them out, not because I think they're doing anything wrong necessarily, but they're just the popular one that everybody knows about. Any of those mentor platforms where you just go find a random person and schedule 30 minutes with them and they don't know you. I think you run the risk of not getting that honest feedback. I think there's like, for anybody listening, I guess all I want to throw out there is like, if you're getting positive feedback, it's got to be from a place of trust and openness to make sure that they're not just like inflating your ego unnecessarily. Right. And I think that's something really important to note.
I know you can't really give great feedback to somebody if you don't know them personally. Like you could give feedback on the portfolio or the case study if that's what we're spending half an hour looking at. But in terms of like my skills as a designer, really only get like the surface level in one of those sessions, right?
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about having that group and that cohort, and you guys kind of built yourselves up together and kind of overcoming that imposter syndrome. You just had a LinkedIn Live not long ago with Chris Swin, and you guys were talking about this exact thing, if I remember correctly. Any thoughts there for people who might be going through imposter syndrome and thinking like, oh my God, I can't do this?
Yeah, so there was another thing that actually was surprising to me that really helped my imposter syndrome. And it was kind of counterintuitive. It was posting on LinkedIn, which you wouldn't think would help with
Really?
imposter syndrome because so many people are so nervous to put themselves out there, right? And I actually only did it because a career advisor at my boot camp suggested that I do that. It was never like in my plans to be posting on LinkedIn.
Look where it got you.
But I started posting things and people comment back and they appreciate what I have to say and they find it valuable. And it's like, oh, people care what I have to say. That's pretty cool. And that starts to kind of build that confidence in yourself, right? Not to where I'm like, oh, I'm the expert in UX. Like, that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just sharing things that I've found interesting along my journey. And, I might be one or two steps ahead of somebody else that's on the same journey as me. And that's helpful to them. So it started to kind of build. And actually, I got this like kind of credibility and expertise started to be like applied to my name, even though that was like so far from the truth. But it was like that kind of fake it till you make it type thing, right? So that was super helpful. In terms of like people trying to overcome this on their own, like it can be really challenging. But something that I think about is like, it's just kind of like a knowledge gap, right? So the more that you build these skills, the easier it is to kind of close that up and have confidence in yourself. So just, keep learning and it gets better as time goes on.
So that's something I'm going to talk about in a minute. I've got a couple more thoughts about the confidence gap, but the skills gap. That's something I want to talk about in a second. And actually, don't let me forget this because I want to talk. You mentioned specifically visual design in your boot camp and stuff, and how some of these other people were, from your perspective at least, so far ahead of you. Don't let me forget to ask you about that. But I'm curious, like as far as like imposter syndrome, this is something like I'm curious about. I had a chance to chat with Danielle Barnes not long ago, and we talked about this idea of systemic bias, institutional bias, actually, especially like women and minorities, this sort of false sense that they weren't worth it or weren't able to do some of these things. And I'm curious, from a woman's perspective coming into UX design, I'm curious, is that something like you ever kind of ran into or even thought about? Because honestly, as a man, especially like a cis white dude, not something like I ever kind of thought about. I'm curious, is that something like you ran into?
I feel like I was really tricking myself in the back of my brain. It's like, I know I'm going to be good at this. Like, I can do this. Like, it wasn't really a factor as much into my career, but I do notice it like working as a designer in my career, like luckily my first role, I had this badass, awesome female manager leading the team of like 4 guys. And then I was brought on, right? So like she
Right
was
on,
always
right
a
on.
really great example to me. But I do notice it now, like in my current role. So I'm on a team. I'm the one designer. I'm the one female. The 2 PMs on the team, they're both males. And all of the engineers on the team, I think there's like 16 engineers. They're all guys, right? So you kind of have to have that confidence in yourself. Luckily, it's never been a problem where people look down on me or don't want to hear my opinion. I feel very well respected there, but it's hard not to notice these things, right? Like they do exist, especially in the tech community.
Something like I see a lot, especially like startups. It's like the bro culture, like basically like a fraternity building some software. I feel like that's less and less after like post Me Too movement, but still, like my first job was at a startup, and love the dudes. They were great guys, but like going out and like chugging beers and stuff and like all that crap. It's just like I don't know, got that sense like a bunch of like inappropriate jokes and things like that you now in like 2024, I'm just like, I can't imagine anybody doing that and thinking it's appropriate. But anyway, love those
Yeah.
guys. They were great guys. I don't want to like call them out or anything, but I don't know. I kind of got that sense, and being like I said, a white dude, it fit in perfectly. I could like hang out and it wasn't a problem, but I could easily see like that being super uncomfortable for other people, especially if that's their first job and thinking like
Yes.
that's how it is. So anyway, it's always something I like to bring up and think about because I think that's something, especially some people just overlook and don't think about. Check your privilege.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned this earlier. I want to kind of come back to this, but like building the confidence up. Can you dig a little bit more into that? Like, posting on LinkedIn, it kind of helped you. How did that help you? How did that help you build confidence? What about that like kind of got you feeling like you knew what you were doing?
Yeah, it took me a while to get to the part where I feel like I knew what I was doing. I still don't know that I'm like fully there. There's always like learning to do, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I was posting consistently. I started posting like once a month, twice a month. Then I got up to like twice a week. That was like the pinnacle of like
Oh, wow.
the most
Yeah.
posting I was comfortable with. I didn't want to be that every day, right? And people started reaching out to me. Thank you. Like I really appreciate your content. It's so helpful. Or this example was super applicable to what I'm going through. And I was like, oh, like it's not just like building my confidence, but it's legitimately helping other people. And that was very cool to experience that firsthand and, very encouraging to make me want to keep going. It's like, well, there's more of that stuff that I have to share and I could share this. And even sometimes, you think you have this great idea for a post and it kind of flops. And I have like this really simple idea that seems super obvious to me and it resonates with so many people and people love it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know this. Like, you never know like what is going to stick or what isn't necessarily. So again, treating it as an experiment and not being attached to those vanity metrics has helped me become more confident and comfortable with it as well, because that was something that I have to overcome because there's this pressure, right? People are watching you. They're not, like people go
Yeah.
about their day-to-day lives. They're busy with their own stuff. Like we think we're under this lens and really like we don't have to see it from that perspective. It's just an opportunity to practice your storytelling, meet some new people and try something new, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that too, because like something that it took me way too long, even just like on Facebook and Twitter, like back in the day. But like when you post and it gets no engagement, it's not because everyone saw it and ignored it. It's because no one saw it. And
Yes.
if that's the case, then you don't have to feel so embarrassed that it didn't get any engagement because no one saw it to begin with, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I have posts sometimes like that just totally flop, and I'm thinking, oh, these are going to be great. And it gets like 5 likes, like single digit, And at first I was like kind of embarrassed. I'm like, oh, people are going to see this and think it's lame. But then I'm like, nobody saw it. That's why I got no likes. So
Nobody's looking. Yeah.
nobody's looking. Nobody cares. Nobody, like, people could
Yeah.
care less, even if, you're a quote unquote like influencer and it flops. Like, there's obviously that like dopamine hit and you get addicted to that dopamine hit, like, oh, I got it, going viral, blah, 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 whatever. But when it doesn't, like, it's just because like nobody saw it and it doesn't matter. And you don't have to feel silly. It's not like everyone's laughing at you in the schoolyard.
It doesn't matter. That's exactly it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not so serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love how you said that too. It's just like, just do it, just start. And something else too that I found, like posting almost daily, regularly, is like I've gotten so much faster at writing a post or writing anything in general, to be honest, like show notes or
Yes.
emails or whatever. Again, the practice is skill. I can just do it faster, not because I'm better at it, because I've just done it so much. I've already said 1,000 things I could just pull from those little things and like put it together. It's not even like it gets daunting at first, like when you have to think about like, oh, I have to have my social media calendar and every day I got to come up with 30 ideas, blah, blah, blah. It's like I've stopped doing that. And I just like the night
But
before, I'm just,
good.
or even sometimes like an hour before, I'm like, what have I not said recently? Or even going back and like I said something, maybe I have a different idea now or I can expand on it, and it's just like one of those things like, you don't spend like hours doing it anymore. And
It
I feel like
shouldn't
so many
be like
people,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, we put this pressure on ourselves to have this post that's perfect and curated and has all the right spelling and fact check everything. And like, yes, we don't want to be putting out misinformation, but at a certain point, like, it doesn't have to be that amount of pressure, right? Like, just try it. Just go for it and see what happens, and maybe it'll work and maybe not. Like, I used to spend hours, trying to craft the perfect post, and that was a mistake in hindsight. Now
Yeah.
you're right. It still takes me admittedly longer than I'd like it to, but I could probably put a post together in like an hour or less, which is a sweet spot to be in. And if I can't think of an idea, I don't post. You don't
Yeah,
have to
just
put
skip it.
that
Right.
pressure on either, right? So like again, just trying to take the pressure off myself, be kind to myself, and just try to treat it more as a hobby than like something that I need to do. That list of things as career switchers, like you have to be doing this, going to events, posting on LinkedIn, creating Medium articles. Like you don't, like pick a couple things, try them out, and see how that works for you.
All right. So one thing I want to talk about too here is this idea of the skill gap. You talked a little bit about your visual design. You felt like you had a skill gap there, and which makes sense. I mean, hospitality, science aspect, there's not a lot of visual design there, but you were good at some things. But obviously, there were other things that weren't transferable or things that you needed to learn. So I want to talk a little bit about the skill gap. I want to hear your thoughts as someone who has dealt with career shifting. How does a career shifter take stock of what they can and cannot do, and then fill, or I could say bridge the skill gap so they can do those things?
Yeah. So the first thing I think of is like people always really focus on the technical skills. Like, I need to learn Figma. I need to learn Photoshop. I need to learn how to prototype. And it's like, yeah, like sometimes those skills are valuable. Like, yes, you'll probably be using Figma and those things, but like really the soft skills that are a lot more valuable and are a lot harder to pick up, especially in something like a 3-month boot camp. And those are often the ones that are most transferable. So if I look back at my restaurant experience, me learning every ingredient on every piece of the menu, not transferable, right? But, I was able to articulate that to the guests and help them pick, what might be the best dish for them if they had an allergy or a dietary restriction or they had a time crunch or things like that, right? So that kind of comes into the problem solving. There's ways that you can spin those non-transferable skills that likely have a soft skill associated with them that will be beneficial as a designer, right? And we kind of talked about the problem solving aspect before. Okay, I made a reservation for 6 people, but I actually have 8. Can you still fit us in? Or I need to sit by the window. It's our anniversary. We're special. Yeah, okay, like we can move you there. All of these things, right? So yeah, that's not transferable, but soft skills of thinking on your feet, problem solving, and helping people, day to day is. So that's kind of how I would look at it. It seems obvious when I explain these examples because I've thought about it a lot. But that's kind of on you to do that thinking about your past as well. So what are those transferable skills? And if you're not sure, you can literally Google like a waiter versus UX design, see what people are saying and see what
Absolutely.
resonates with you. Oh, and maybe it sparks an idea, right? So that's kind of how I was able to turn a lot of those irrelevant skills into an asset or something that I already had experience with that would be so beneficial, for my next team.
I love having conversations with recent career shifters too. And I just had one not long ago with Stephanie Torero. She's an actress turned UX designer, and some other folks. Matthew McPhail. He was an industrial designer, which is a lot of transferable skills there. To be fair, to UX design, and Bobby Johnson. He like baked some cakes, and he was a cake baker and decorator and stuff, and
Oh,
fashion designer and all this stuff. Anyway, there's like so many cool things out there that I feel like so many people maybe not realize like how transferable those skills actually are. But like you said, I want to call this out. It's about taking stock of it. And I think something that a lot of people, I don't know, maybe they do or don't. I've talked to people and a lot of them haven't really thought about this. But like the question that I think you should be asking yourself is when you are a career shifter is why? Why UX design? Like what
yes.
is it about this career that I actually want? Because it's right now, job market kind of sucks, right? It's very competitive. The money can be good, obviously, but there's also a lot of layoffs and all these other things. So, really like thinking about that and then taking stock of why you want this job in the first place. And then like, you're saying all these skills that you have and the things that you've done, like what does really transfer? But I also think it's important to think about like what doesn't transfer. And one of the things I want to think about is like you brought up the visual design skill. Obviously, right now, companies are looking for generalists. They want to see people who have really beautiful portfolios and really great UI work and things like that. Looking at some of your work, I think you have some incredible UI work. I think your visual design is wonderful. I'm curious because it's funny to hear you say like your UI and your visual design was terrible. I'm curious, like, one, how bad really was it? And two, if it was really that bad, how did you get to a point where you have improved this much to actually have like really impressive visual design? Because I think that's probably out of all the hard skills, maybe the most important imperative to like really beef up that hard skill, that one hard skill, probably more than any other. I'm curious, you have any advice for people that feel like they're coming from those non-design related fields that don't have the design skills, design eye? How do they beef that up?
Yeah, it was definitely pretty bad.
I want to see some of those old examples.
Looking back at some of my first work, some of those old ones, I actually redid one of my first projects ever just to like kind of see how far I come. And that was really nice. It was nice to reflect back, but also like, wow, like I've come a long way, like in the nicest way possible. So yeah, that was something that I struggled with. And it was frustrating for me because the advice was always just like, practice some more. And it's like, yeah, I am practicing and I can see that it looks bad, like that's not really helpful enough.
Right, yeah.
So there was her name's Keeligard. She recommended on YouTube, there's a graphic designer. He goes by Satori Graphics. And he makes these awesome, like 10-minute videos where it's before and after. He takes like an okay or like a mediocre design and makes it great and explains each step. And I watched like 5 of those and I was like, oh, the visual hierarchy's off. And I'm like, who am I? Like, like these are not terms that I was like even familiar with before. And it made it like so crystal clear to me because I'm the kind of person that really benefits from like a process or like a firm structure to like help me achieve something. There's a clear answer as to how to do something that makes it easy for me because then I do that thing and then it's good. That's the thing that's a bit maybe, more subjective about like the visual design, right? But it really cleared things up for me. So then I was able to understand, oh, the alignment is poor here. That's why. Oh, the visual hierarchy is off. Oh, I have too many competing colors or whatever it is. Just learning those fundamental skills really helped me kind of tailor my eye for those designs. And then I know I already was like crapping on like practice, how that's like not the best advice. But once you learn these tools and you can actually apply them, that's where the practice comes in. So I was lucky to join a team where I was brought on as an intermediate, but I was the most junior on the team. And we would have like design syncs twice a week. And I could see people, what they're designing, and they would give me feedback on what I was designing. And that was like invaluable for me to have like a team of people that were like invested in my success. And I just learned every day I was learning something new. So again, I came through practice and having support to kind of build those skills up.
You've mentioned this, and I think this is worth like highlighting specifically, but doing those critiques, that is a skill in its own. Like, how do you actually look at someone's work and determine it's good, but how do you then relay why it isn't working, what they can do to improve it and make it more effective, right? Because it's not just like, I like this, I don't like this. It's got to be like an objective thing. And I think so many people, and this is like something I think like a 4-year art degree generally does pretty well, is teaches you critique. Builds up that thick skin. It tears your work down. Even if it's really good, they're going to find something to critique about it in art school. And I think that's something like a lot of career shifters or people going through boot camp, they miss a lot of times. I feel like personally, I did not go to art school. I didn't go to design school. And I feel like I missed that. I feel like that was something that took me a long time to kind of build up that skill. But like, if you can find, people to do that with and learn not just a visual design piece, but also the critique skill, the skill of critique, I think that's huge. I don't know if you've appreciated that or you've thought about that. To me, that's something so many junior designers, I don't feel like are really equipped to do really great critique or even take critical feedback. If they get like internalize it and feel like, like they're getting, beat up on or something. And I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. Is that something you thought about? Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I was lucky that we got a little bit of feedback during my boot camp, but that's actually one of the places that ADP List is good for. You could book 5 different feedback sessions with 5 different people,
absolutely.
Get their opinion, see what they're saying, and then really take that in like, oh, this 4 different people are all agreeing that maybe this is something I should focus on. But taking feedback, you're right, that is an area that a lot of people tend to take personally, and you just really can't as a designer. I designed something the first time. I'm going to try to do 3 different iterations at least so that I can have different options and we can kind of be playful about it. If I just design one thing once the first time, it is never going to hit the mark perfectly. Like we can't expect that. And that's why feedback is so valuable. So people maybe get like a little bit too emotionally invested in their designs. And that's just not what it's about. You kind of have to detach yourself a little bit in a sense. And it can be hard if you don't have practice with that.
Yeah, and the other thing too I want to highlight about visual design is like, again, you always hear like art versus design and how one is totally different from the other. And I think designers, we often like to think of ourselves as artists, right? Artist is valuable because art is intrinsically valuable, and you want a Monet because it's a beautiful piece of art and it can sit on its own. But nobody wants your visual design, your UI work because it's beautiful on its own. But like, like there are rules, there are best practices, and best practice can be a dirty word, I guess. But there are, just like you said, visual hierarchy kind of standards, alignment standards, things that are just table stakes that you wouldn't necessarily know. And I think visual design is a skill just like any other skill, and you can learn it and you can understand those techniques and the rules and apply them to your own stuff. And so often I see junior designers that come in, especially ones that don't have a design background, and they are afraid of copying. They're afraid of having their work look like other people. So they just make something new and unique and novel. And it is new and unique and novel, but it looks like total crap. Like don't try to go and like make your own thing. Like, this is something that I found out not long ago, and it's just kind of fascinating to me. I never really thought about this. When apprentices back in the day, like in the 1800s and stuff, they would never create art on their own. Like for years, they would copy. They would take a classic and they would study it, and they would copy the brushstroke and the way that the paint was applied to the canvas, and like how much paint, where was their hand when they move their brush, and that creates all these different visual styles. And they learn those things. And then once they learned those things, then they went off and they created their own new, unique pieces of art. And there is such an opportunity for junior designers to look at what works today and just copy it for the first like 6 months, a year, however. And yes, your stuff's going to look generic and it's going to look like everyone else's, but it won't look terrible. Like it
It'll
won't
look
look
real
bad.
too,
It'll look real,
right?
right? Exactly. So I just think that's something that, I don't know, so many people, I feel like they just want to go and they create stuff with like weird gradients in the background and all this stuff and like weird sizes, and nothing works well, all for the sake of being new and unique. Copy for a little bit. Once you copy, then you can go off and create your own new, unique things once you understand those rules, and you can bend them and break them where necessary and where it works. There's such an opportunity there to just practice, to learn. It's a skill. If you feel like your visual design skills and your visual design chops aren't there, you can learn those things and you can master them, I promise.
Well, yeah, I had this idea too where like I need to come up with something new and novel, right? And it's not like that. Like we need to prioritize the user experience, right? We want to create something people are familiar with. And that's why like these examples exist and these patterns really that people tend to follow when they're designing, right? So yeah, definitely don't be afraid of copying or learning by example, right? So some of these things can be the best way to get started and understanding, looking at your favorite apps. How does it look different from the one you designed? What what is standing out, and maybe what can you adapt to kind of help it be more in that direction?
So you and I were both mentors at Mento Design Academy. And one of the things, like one of the first parts of the curriculum is to copy, to find a couple of
Yes.
apps, desktop and mobile, and copy them. And I love that exercise. But, what I do notice, though, a lot of people will do is they'll just copy the image, they'll put it in a Figma, and they'll just draw shapes around everything and copy it perfectly. But the important thing there is to understand not just how to copy and how to create a shape and to mimic the shape. It's to understand, like, why does that work? Copy it so that you can see, like, my design looks completely different than Spotify, or looks completely different than some iOS app or whatever. And I think that's something like a lot of people kind of miss, is like, it's not just the copying, it's the understanding why you're copying and how you're copying and how to apply that going forward. So anyway, I don't know. I love that. I love that exercise
Oh,
that we
great point.
do with Mento. And
Yeah.
I think that's like a super valuable thing. But I see so many people that just like start from a blank canvas.
Oh, that's so intimidating when you're just starting out and you don't
Yeah.
know the rules, right? So that can be really tough.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of storytelling, and specifically storytelling around your story, because one of the things that I think is so inspiring about career shifters in general, there's always an interesting story there. You don't just wake up and decide to change a career. There's something happens. There's like an event in your life. There's some life-changing thing that's just like, you know what? Today's the day. I'm switching to UX. I'm curious, when I think about that, like that's something I feel like a lot of career shifters, they kind of ignore their background and focus on just being UX designer. I want to hear from your perspective the power of storytelling to sell not just your ability as a UX designer, but also all those transferable skills that we talked about and the other things that had almost nothing to do in theory with UX, but end up being very transferable.
Yeah. So to like just really focus on, okay, now I'm the UX designer, I'd say is a huge missed opportunity because your past brings so much value and it's part of who you are, right? Like, again, I could go back to my restaurant experience. All those soft skills I had, that helped me to sell myself, have confidence in myself, talk to people and really convince them that I had the skills necessary to do the job. And it's interesting, right? It helps you stand out compared to these other people that would also be applying for the role. So I think it's kind of on you again. Like, I was talking about, okay, like what are those transferable skills? It's on you to research those. It's also on you to put together this compelling narrative as to like why your story is relevant and how it all ties together. That's always the first question you're going to get asked in interviews. Tell me about yourself. Put a really good story together, make people interested, engaged, make it memorable so they're thinking about you after the interview, right? And all of your past really comes into that. It's not just about, okay, I'm a UX designer, I'm the most professional, There's other parts to being a well-rounded applicant as well. Like, do I actually want to work with this person, right? So if you can talk about yourself in a way that's interesting, conversational, it's only beneficial in my eyes.
And that's something too, like even on your portfolio, on your website, I've seen so many career shifters that on their about page will say, I love to solve problems. I am a, talented UX designer, blah, blah, blah. And it's all this like, basically the generic stuff everybody says about themselves when they talk about UX design. And I'm like, what about that interesting stuff that you have in your backstory? Like, what about all that other cool thing, all those cool things you did for the last like 10 years, whatever it was,
right?
Like show that off, I actually had one time I did a mentor session ADP list where someone, it wasn't a career shifter, but they were an immigrant. Their family had moved here when they were like 15 or something, and they had to like learn English. And this person was very well spoken in English, by the way. So the fact that they learned English at like 15 and now, I don't know, they were in their 30s, so 15 years, and they were like fluent, very little accent, like that alone, I found incredibly impressive. But, they came as in, they didn't have any money. They did all this stuff. And I'm like, that is an incredibly fascinating story. Like, why did your family move here when you were 15? Like, what happened there? There's all kinds of opportunities, even if you're not career shifting, to tell an interesting story about yourself. And like you said, that stands out, And when I'm, as a hiring manager, I'm putting a team together, I really want, and a good hiring manager will do this, look for people with a diverse background. Not, like, even if everybody's like looks the same, like a diverse background where I'm coming from a different perspective and I'm going to bring a unique voice to the group, and I can't do that if all you tell me is you like to solve problems and you're, a UX designer, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know. I just love that. And I love that idea. And so many people are just scared to tell their story.
Oh, it makes you look unprofessional or something, right? You're less credible. And it's just couldn't be further from the truth. Like, you have to look at it from a different mindset. Like, you're adding to your credibility. It's all these additional skills that you're bringing to the table. And that's in how you tell the story, right? So it's kind of on you to really put that together.
For sure. And the other thing too, this person had mentioned like, well, I don't want to like turn anybody off. I don't want to say something and have them be offended by a thing I did. Like I've talked to another person before who had a side project. They did like I can't remember, like created something and they sold things online. And they were like, well, I don't want to put that on my portfolio or on my website. I'm like, well, why? They're like, well, what if somebody doesn't want to hire me because I have a side project? I'm like, well, would you want to work for them and hide your side project
Yes,
like, while you're working there?
exactly.
Like, I mean, like you could use that as like a way to sort of even, filter, self-censor the companies that you wouldn't want to work for in the first place, And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Like highlight the people. You want to work for the companies that appreciate your background. You don't want to work for the companies that would be ashamed of you talking about that in a meeting, right? So I don't know. I'm all about like showing it off and letting the companies find the right fit, whether that's you or somebody else, So I don't know. That's just an interesting thing I hear people say a lot.
No, I'm actually glad that you brought that up because I ran into that as well. Like, I got some feedback on my portfolio, like, oh, your personality is like a little loud. And I was like, that's great. Because if that's a turnoff for companies, I don't want to work there. It's perfect. Like, we're both doing each other a favor, right? So yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
I love that. Yeah. So I'm curious, any places for a career shifter to go to sort of learn about that or practice maybe, talking about themselves and that idea of like, tell me about yourself.
Well, I have to like shout out to Jeff White. He's like the
Oh yeah,
storytelling
absolutely.
guy, right?
Hell yeah.
Like he has the best course on storytelling. It's pretty affordable. And he has a free ebook that you can download that has like all of the basics. Like if you don't want to spend any money, at least start there. It's a quick read and it is so worthwhile. And it's a skill that is like not really talked about as much in boot camps or design programs. And it's so valuable because it kind of
Yeah.
lends itself to that marketing piece as well. Like your portfolio, it's a marketing piece. The story you tell, like you're convincing someone that you're worthy of this position, right? So worth absolutely spending a little bit of time to buff up those skills and practice, right? Like just telling stories in general. I've been telling stories every dinner when I come home from school. How's your day? Tell a story about your day, right? So I have a
Yeah.
lot of practice with that. Didn't realize that would be transferable, but it's very easy for me. I'm comfortable sharing a quick story about something, getting to the point, right? So absolutely worth practicing. If you're looking for resources, I can't recommend Jeff's
Oh
storytelling
man.
course enough.
Oh, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff is great. And also too, if you're not familiar with Jeff, he posts on LinkedIn all the time. So find Jeff White. I'm sure just follow me or Emily on LinkedIn and you'll find us commenting or
All
interacting
the
with,
time.
with one
Yeah.
of Jeff's like almost every day. But yeah, and I love Jeff's stuff too. So he's actually sponsored the show too. So like every once in a while, I'll throw out a coupon. So go listen to some other episodes and you can find a coupon for Jeff's stuff. But when a lot of people hear about storytelling too, they think like, oh, once upon a time there was a blah, blah, blah. And it's like this sort of hero's journey story. And what I love about Jeff's stuff too is he takes real applicable scenarios, like how to apply storytelling to your case studies, right? Or how to present it to clients or stakeholders or whatever, and actually explain it and break it down. I can't recommend Jeff's enough. I love that too. One other thing that you mentioned, this is something like you've been telling stories like from like when you were a kid, is again, storytelling, presenting your story, telling your story. It's a skill, just like any other skill. And I think if you practice that, just record yourself, or do it in front of a mirror. I think it's hard for a lot of people to see themselves, but like record yourself and then watch it back.
It's so uncomfortable, but
Oh my God, all the filler words.
it's such a good thing to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like all the filler words, like, oh my God, I said 30 times. And that's the kind of stuff that I think so many people just don't even realize they do it. But when you watch yourself,
You can't deny it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You can't deny it. So anyway, I love that stuff. Something I want to talk about lastly is taking some of those storytelling things. You talked about this is building your network. And I want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn and how you have used LinkedIn and maybe some tips and advice for other people looking to do the same to, you mentioned you found some mentors, you found a support network all through LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is super powerful, but I want to hear some of your thoughts about that, using LinkedIn to kind of share the journey and the story that we're talking about to really promote yourself and get hired.
Yeah, it goes back to the storytelling, right? Like every part of my journey adds to my story as an individual, as a designer, right? So I'm wanting to share that online and get people's feedback, talk to people, have a conversation, meet somebody that's going through something that's similar perhaps, or that already has experience in this area, you're just kind of putting yourself out there to potentially build those relationships, which I think is really valuable. I know a lot of people are nervous to post on LinkedIn. You don't have to post. You could comment on somebody's post. You
Yes.
can build relationships that way, right? You start commenting on a post, they comment back. Maybe you comment on the next post before you know it, you're sending them a message, and then maybe you're meeting for coffee, right? It should be a lot more organic than, sending this connection request without a note. And, we don't
Yep.
actually know them, but it's just, I want to have as many connections as possible, right? Like it's those vanity metrics that are really easy to kind of get hung up on when really it's all about this opportunity to build real connections with people that have experience in the area that you want. So it could be really helpful. So yeah, I would really focus on just like commenting if you can. If you're open enough to like want to post, like treat it as an experiment, right? It's not about, oh, I only got 10 likes, it's a fail. Like, no, like learn what works, what doesn't, what you're comfortable with, try something new. It's a skill again, too. We keep going back to these, the more practice you put into it, the easier it gets and the better it will get, right? Like I like to post on LinkedIn now too, because it's a good opportunity for me to practice my storytelling, write something concise and to the point and interesting, right? So again, it kind of comes full circle here. This is a tool that I found really beneficial in multiple areas rather than just the networking, which I think a lot of people tend to focus on.
And I think when people think of networking on LinkedIn, I think they think exactly like what you just said is like, I'm going to send you a connection request and we're connected and now I've networked. you know? And I can't like tell you how many people I've talked to that are like, yeah, I added some money on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, did you
And then
talk
what?
to them?
Yeah.
Did you do anything?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love, this is something I actually, I don't know, maybe like I only figured this out like a year ago. Not that this was like incredible or mind blowing, but I started following people. And then I saw who they interacted with, and then I followed them. And then I saw who they interacted
Yeah.
with, and I followed them. And my kind of bubble started to grow. So it wasn't like this echo chamber of like 2 or 3 people. And those kinds of things, like you said, I mean, the commenting is just the perfect place to start a conversation. Like you do not have to DM somebody and ask them to have a Zoom call. I mean,
No.
comment,
Please
like
don't.
even just
Yeah.
like comment on their comment or reply, even if they're not posting, if someone posts and then someone else comments, reply to that comment,
Yeah.
it could be just a question. It could be like an interesting insight. It could be, hey, thanks for sharing if you don't have anything to say. Yeah, I feel like the comments thread, man, like to me, that's where the magic happens. Like that's where the beautiful kind of relationships start to really like the seed
Yeah.
gets planted in the comment thread. It's not just about, and it's something I'm going to kind of highlight what you just said too. It's not about just posting every day, right? It's about engaging with people and
Yes.
finding those people and starting that conversation. And then eventually, like you said, you end up on the Zoom call, or the virtual coffee chat or coffee in real life if you're
Because
lucky
you
enough to
both
live
want to
close to
be on
people.
it, right? Not because you feel like
Yeah.
that's the next step that you're supposed to take. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had this is a funny story. I actually had a dude that reached out to me on LinkedIn. He did cold message me, but if you're going to cold message somebody, do it this way. Like I have this book like back here, this like random book. It's the Star Trek Designing the Final Frontier. And it's like all about set design and costume design for Star Trek, right?
Cool.
And my wife got it for me. It's an awesome book. I was on a video thing. I got recorded and somebody posted it somewhere. It wasn't even one of my videos. It was like I was a guest on something. And this dude sent me a message and he was like, I just have to ask a random question. Was that the Designing the Final Frontier in the back of your bookshelf? And I was like, holy crap, dude, how did you even pick that out?
You got the
And
eye.
so he
Yeah.
was like, by the way, he's like, I'd love to chat. I'm like, of course. Yes. Here, here's my calendar. Like, let's schedule 45 minutes. I was like excited, like super happy to talk to this dude. We didn't even talk about UX for the first like 20 minutes. We talked about Star Trek. But, that is a meaningful relationship. Like that is the
Yes.
basis for a
Yeah.
meaningful relationship, and of course I was going to talk to that guy. Like, why would I be like, no way? Even if I was busy, I'd probably be like, I want to find 20 minutes to talk to you about Star Trek. So anyway, that kind of stuff, like, do that. Like that's unique and it helps you kind of stand out. LinkedIn is not, like you said, just sending a cold connection request with no message.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
Or worse, a random thing that's like, hey, can you find me a job? That is absolutely.
Oh, that is the worst when it's like, I don't even know you, or can you give me a referral? It's like, for what? Like, I don't know how you work. I don't even know who you are. Like,
Exactly. All right. So lastly, I want to talk about like building a support network outside of LinkedIn. Switching careers, it's just like, it's terrifying. I want to talk about like the support network and, how you've built your support network up beyond even LinkedIn, personally, professionally, locally, globally, and finding that support network. How did you build that support network up? And any advice for people who might be in a similar position who are looking for that support in any capacity?
yeah, so it takes time and it takes putting yourself out there, which are two things that people don't always like to recognize right away. But there's different groups that you can join. I'm a part of a couple different really great Slack communities. You can just join them for free and start talking to people that have common interests with you that also want to have similar conversations, ideas, things like that. That's a really great place to start. I kept in contact with some people from my boot camp because we have, again, a shared experience. It's very easy to connect over that and build a relationship. And then from that point, I've tried to go to events. I aim to go to one a month. That doesn't happen. I go to a couple a year, well, for being honest, and, meet people there. They have the same interests, right? They are also wanting to attend this event. And then I find people that, I have great conversation with. That's a very natural way to follow up and start to build a relationship, right? So from LinkedIn, from events, all of these places, I've been able to build a great network. You're right, globally, even at this point, which is kind of surreal to think about.
Yeah, it's nuts.
When I traveled to Iraq, I met my friend, the UX designer there, and we talked UX. Like, the craziest things can happen if you just are willing to put yourself out there.
How did you go to Iraq?
Last year, actually.
For what?
Or not last year, two summers ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to hear about this.
Literally worldwide, right?
That's so cool. And did you meet them on LinkedIn?
I met him on LinkedIn, if you can imagine.
Holy
Yeah.
crap. Okay, so how did you?
Yeah.
Where were you going to Iraq for? What part of Iraq first?
Well, I wanted to visit all of Iraq. I was going to start south and then work my way north, but unfortunately, the
Oh, that's
visa system, you can
fascinating.
only get visa on arrival. But my flight got canceled, so I had to fly to Kurdistan, which is in the northern part of Iraq, and they have their own separate visa there. You get a Kurdistan visa instead of an Iraq visa, and then you
Right.
can't like cross the border into Iraq because you can only get visa on arrival at the airports. So I would have had to flown back. Very
Oh, wow.
expensive. Time was ticking. So, anyways, I love to travel. So I'm actually dreading your question at the end where you ask what the favorite book, because I've been like thinking about this and like I don't read. The only books I read are like Lonely Planet guides. So
That counts.
yeah,
That's a book.
that's my answer. So get ready. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, no, that's
Yeah.
so cool, man. Iraq. I love that. That's such a fascinating. Man, I could probably talk to you for like an hour just about your vacation to Iraq. I would love to do
It was
that. What
really
is
cool.
Iraqi
Yeah.
food like? I want to talk about that for a
Uh,
second. We're going off
So
script,
I'm
but
like the worst person to ask about like the cuisine because I'm vegetarian. So whenever I travel,
oh,
I
okay.
never really get to enjoy like the delicious foods. A lot of meats there, but
Oh, okay.
similar to
Okay.
like Syrian food or like Lebanese food, like lots of great fresh produce always available. Lots of like rice and other dishes with things like that. Lots of fresh salads, grape leaves. Those are some of my like favorite things to eat. But big tea culture there as well.
Yeah.
But
Oh, wow.
unfortunately, shawarma, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Like donair, falafel, but
Oh, man.
I love I
So
love
good.
Middle Eastern food. Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I was in New York and I found an Afghani restaurant,
Cool.
which was really good. Oh, man, it was great. And a lot of like pasta, like noodles, which I didn't
Oh,
expect.
really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. There was like some pasta dishes and like almost like a dumpling that was similar to almost like ravioli kind of in a way. It was less like an Asian dumpling, like you might think of like a Chinese dumpling or something. Anyway, it was more like a ravioli dumpling, like flatter. And anyway, very good. Amazing food.
Ravioli dumpling. Now I'm gonna be thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Like, I don't know why, like, obviously, like Afghanistan, Iraq, I think about that as an American. That kind of, those two go together in my head when I know they probably shouldn't, but
It's the places people generally don't travel to. I get it. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, that's fascinating. God, I'm jealous. Like, that would be a really cool trip. I do all that
That's pretty
stuff.
cool.
Like, I don't know if you ever plan on having kids or anything, but like, I can't imagine like taking kids on a trip to Iraq.
That
But
was part of the reason. It's like, oh, I am newly engaged. Like, we haven't bought our house yet. Maybe now is like the best time to go to like these countries that have historically been like less traveled.
But that's just like such a fascinating story. Anyway, I could talk to, like I said, but for like an hour just about that trip. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk
I
about
know.
UX design
Yeah,
and career
back to
shifting.
business. Yeah.
So, all right. So Emily, we've been talking to you for a little while today. Before we get out of here, anything else that we didn't get a chance to chat about that you feel like you want to say, people career shifting, any other bits of advice we didn't get a chance to go over?
Yeah, we kind of missed like part of like the actually applying for these roles, right? That's like this part of the puzzle
Oh
that we
yeah,
kind of missed.
that part. Yeah,
Yeah,
the actual part where you
yeah.
actually career shift.
Yeah, do you think we should get into that like in our LinkedIn Live, or would you want to like discuss?
Let's do this. Is there like an abbreviated synopsis or breakdown that you would give somebody in like a couple of minutes? Tips and tricks,
Okay,
something that's just sort of keep in mind.
rapid
And
fire.
then
Let's go.
if
Yeah.
anyone has any questions about that, we could talk about it in our LinkedIn Live next week.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, the main thing that I would encourage people to really focus on is your application package. And what I mean by that is your resume, your portfolio, and your LinkedIn. Those are the three areas that the hiring manager or the recruiter is going to be looking at. Really take the time to make sure that they're done well. You would be shocked. I'm actually involved in hiring right now. How many people apply that have like broken links, a really poorly designed portfolio, or the resume just doesn't tell the story of like what they bring to the table? Take the time. When I graduated boot camp, I spent a month before I applied for any jobs,
Wow.
just consistently getting feedback on all of these different, deliverables and making sure that they were up to the level I wanted. Because if I'm going to get eliminated from the running, I don't want it to be for anything that's within my control. If it's for my lack of experience, that's fine, but let's make sure that everything that I can control is done to the best level. So I always encourage that for people as well. Even in a competitive market, you can still stand out just by making sure you're a really well-rounded and appealing applicant.
As somebody who has done hiring in the past, I can't tell you, like, every single time I get an application, I go to their website. That's the first thing I do, or I read their resume. Then I go to their website, and then I go to LinkedIn and see if they have something to say. Every time.
Yeah.
And I can't tell how many times I've gone. It's just like activity. So-and-so hasn't posted yet, and there's like no comments, there's no likes, there's nothing. It's like, what did you make LinkedIn for? I don't get it. But like that kind of stuff, like it's never going to be something where I'm like, you're not going to get a job because you haven't posted anything on LinkedIn.
Right.
But it's a great opportunity to supplement the way you think, how you feel about certain things, your position on different, maybe controversial topics. I don't know, whatever it is. I don't know how controversial UX. I guess sometimes it can be pretty controversial,
Sometimes, yeah.
depending who you ask. But I think like that's something to think about. Is like, yeah, like you said, the package, LinkedIn. So many people just ignore it, but it's just such a great way to like peek behind the curtains a little bit and beyond just the case study and the resume and stuff like that. I think that's great advice.
Exactly.
I love that. All right. So Emilie, before we get out of here, we've got some questions that we like to ask all our guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, why don't you tell everybody out there where they can find you, what's your website, LinkedIn, all that stuff, and they can follow you. And you've got a new newsletter and stuff that's really awesome. Give yourself a little
you're
plug.
great. You're great at puffing me up here. Yeah. So you can obviously find me on LinkedIn. My handle is just Emilie-Mazurek. You can also find me on my personal website, dandydesign.ca. I'm offering mentorship there. I've also got portfolio reviews, and I have a bunch of free UX resources that I'm giving away in my new newsletter. So if you want to subscribe, there's a UX resources button. Feel free to click that, and I'll be sending resources periodically because I'm still figuring out the schedule and how that works for me. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. And lastly, before we get into the questions, I want to give a plug for our live event next week. So this is, again, coming out on Tuesday, May 21st, the following week, Thursday, May 30th at 12 Eastern, at noon Eastern. Emilie's going to join us live. We'll be hanging out on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, whatever that's called, and then Instagram's version of that as well. So check out beyonduxdesign.com/events. You can sign up for whatever version you want. Pick your poison, whatever social media app you like to use. You can also submit a question there for Emilie. We're going to be keeping track of all those questions, and then we'll get all your questions answered live. So make sure to join us, beyonduxdesign.com/events. It's going to be a lot of fun. Emilie, one more time, what kind of stuff are you looking for people to ask you for that event?
Yeah, we didn't really get to like the job search at all. So if you have any questions on that, happy to chat more in that area, or more questions on storytelling. If you're looking to learn a little bit more in that area, always happy to chat on that as well.
Right on. So get your questions, beyonduxdesign.com/events. Join us. It's going to be a dang old hoot. All right, Emilie, I got some questions to ask so all our listeners out there can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
I am ready.
First up, what is your favorite non-design book? And this can be a travel book if you want it.
So thank you for posing it that way, because I was dreading this question, honestly. Because I'm like, I'm going to, here we go, lose all my credibility just in a single question here. Admittedly, I am not a big reader, and the reading that I do tends to be design books lately. With that said, the caveat would be Lonely Planet books, and not because they're like excellent reading. They really tend to be like overly dramatic and over the top. But like for me, I always buy a Lonely Planet book before I travel somewhere, and it's a great souvenir, and it's also great to research and figure out what areas you want to visit. So you should see I have like my big stack of Lonely Planet books in the corner over there.
Yeah, and I love Lonely Planet too, because it's usually like off the beaten path a little bit. A lot of times it's like solo travel, right? I guess it depends on who wrote that specific one, but I don't know. I always was a big fan of Lonely Planet as well. That was actually, look, I got 3 of them right here.
Oh, on my bookshelf. So long. Thank you. Yeah, I'm like, should I pull mine out? Yeah.
I've got like a phrase book and dictionary, and then like the little pocket books. I love the pocket books.
The pocket books are great.
Yeah, Hungarian, Polish dictionary, and then my Budapest book. I just keep it up here because it's like you said, it's a souvenir. And like every time I look, I'm like, oh, I remember that trip. That was fun. Anyway, I love Lonely Planet books too. Those are great. Don't buy a used one though, because you got to have the new ones. If anybody listening,
it needs to be up to date.
It's got to be up to date because you never know. All this stuff might be closed. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast? This can be a travel podcast, by the way, if you want.
So also, I've like kind of fallen off of podcasts, to be fair. Like I used to listen to This American Life quite a bit, and I'm also noticing a theme here is the storytelling, right? Like they tell like great little charming stories that are very engaging. But lately, I've also been listening to. I'm listening on YouTube, but he has a podcast, but it's Mr. Ballin, and it's the Strange, Dark, and Mysterious. He just tells stories. It's kind of like that, the classic trope of like the wife at home washing dishes, like listening to true crime. Well, that's me, just like going around like my chores and stuff. But I just love it. It's so fascinating, these mysteries, what is happening? And he tells them in a very engaging way as well. So I really enjoy that.
I love that. I don't know. Maybe I'm like a stereotypical housewife, but I listen to podcasts when I'm washing the dishes and doing chores.
It's fun, right?
My wife's is always like, "Could you get the damn earbud out of your ear?" I'm like, "I'm washing dishes. Leave me alone." Like, what? All right. What is your favorite meal? And this could be something you've cooked, something you've had at a restaurant, something you've eaten at one of your many travel destinations. Favorite meal?
My favorite meal, it has to be my grandma's mac and cheese. Like it just doesn't get better. She bakes it in the oven so it gets a nice crisp on the top. And she uses Velveeta cheese, which is like, craft like plastic
dude,
cheese,
I
but
mean,
that's what it's
who cares?
for, right? And she always uses
Exactly.
the shells. It catches more
Uh-huh.
sauce. I don't know. Like, it's perfect. You don't
Yeah.
fix it, right? Like, that is perfection in my eyes.
Now, when she bakes it, does she put breadcrumbs on top?
No breadcrumbs. Maybe that could
Okay.
be an area to experiment with, but I'm pretty satisfied with the recipe
Yeah,
as is.
you don't
So
mess with grandma's recipe.
I don't know if I'm going to go there yet.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Not on my account, that's for sure. Especially if it's got a special place in your heart. It's just not the same. You change up one thing. It's funny. My grandma used to make this lasagna all the time. And she had used like dried herbs and just like, kind of
Oh, okay.
crappy ingredients and stuff. Like just like stuff she bought, like McCormick seasoning and like,
And it's been in
I'm
the
gonna
cabinet
buy
for like 7
yeah,
years.
exactly. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna buy like fresh ricotta and fresh herbs and all this crap. And I tried to make lasagna and it was like, it was not even close to being as good as like my grandma's, like
What?
it was all fresh and organic, all this crap. I was like, my grandma's was so much better.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's hilarious.
all right. You can't even when it's just like,
That's a kid.
American, like
Yeah.
produced American cheese or, overly produced American cheese, whatever. Processed. That's what overly processed American cheese, whatever. You can't beat it, dude. Like you can't make a grilled cheese without like American cheese. And
There's a time and a
you know what I
place.
mean? It's
That's
so
all I'm
good.
saying,
Yeah,
Of
course. All right. This one might be very hard for you. You probably have a lot. What is your favorite vacation spot? Can you pick
So I was
just
going to
one?
ask you, like, what kind of vacation are we taking here? Because that
Your
would change the
favorite
answer.
vacation, whatever that is.
Favorite vacation.
If you could go
like
back,
if I was going to go pick somewhere to revisit.
yeah, someplace you've already been. If I said you
Okay.
can only go on one more vacation for the rest of your life, and it has to be somewhere you've already gone.
Okay, yeah. For sure, like somewhere on the Mediterranean, and on the Middle Eastern side would be like my favorite.
Ooh, nice.
Lebanon was like phenomenal. The food is so good. The culture is so rich. There's so much natural beauty there. Syria is like very similar. Like the food is so good. It's in the same area, or Turkey, like somewhere on there. You plant me there. I would have a great vacation.
Somewhere close to the beach. I love that. Oh God, I couldn't imagine. Like I've never been to the Eastern Mediterranean. I would love to go.
Oh, it's so
on my list.
wonderful.
Yeah. I love that. All right, cool. What is your favorite design tool that's not Figma?
Right now, actually at work, we finally just got like security clearance to install Dovetail. So I don't know if you're familiar with it or if you used it, but it's for user interviews and you can upload the video. It creates a transcript and you can tag specific text sections and it makes video reels and you can share them with anyone at your company. It is so awesome.
That is really
and
cool.
it also, you can use AI to like notice any themes or like do affinity mapping. It is such a time saver. And people are like, oh, like our customers are saying this. Like, can you believe that? I'm like, yes, I can. This is what I've been trying to tell you for a while now. So that has been like a game changer.
All
for
it took
me.
was this AI tool.
Yeah. It's so
that's
helpful.
cool. I've never used Dovetail. I love it.
Oh, worth checking out.
Last place I worked, they was just like so strict on security. And it's like, we couldn't even use Figma because all the data was like on someone's server. We were still using Sketch because it was
my gosh.
the one app we could install in our local machine.
4 months for us to get approval, but like I was pushing and we got there. So it's worth it.
That's so funny. Yeah. It just like makes me think about like, when you think about tools as a career shifter, like the tools are important. You got to learn the tools, but like you can't assume that every single place will use the same set of tools some social media influencer told you need to learn.
They will not.
So Figma, maybe, but like there's still people using Sketch. There are still teams using XD. There are still teams using Axure. Like just because everyone's on YouTube loves Figma, it's a great tool. Don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to be using it. So anyway, that's just like a great reminder that, sometimes companies have very strict reasons why they can't. And don't expect it. So I've actually had people that were like, oh, I don't want to work there. They don't use Figma. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, is that the one thing you care about? Like everything else? Like there could be like a million other things that could cause you to not work there. But like,
and all those design tools are so similar, right?
They are.
They're so similar.
I use Illustrator all the time for like design, like logos and graphic design and stuff. And I always like keep using like Adobe key commands. In Figma, I hit like V to to like do the pointer tool. I'm like, wait, that's a wrong key. Anyway, that like drives me crazy, like hopping back and forth. But yeah, for the most part, they are pretty much all identical. All right, Emilie. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about our LinkedIn Live next week. Before we get out of here, one more time, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. You can find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Emilie-Mazurek, and also my personal website, dandydesign.ca, where I have free UX resources and mentoring that I'm offering.
Right on. Do it. and go and sign up for a mentor session with Emilie. You will not be disappointed. Well, all right, y'all, that's it for Emilie and me for today. I hope we helped to give you some insights on how you can work to build your support network as a career shifter and make that career shift successful. Are you a career shifter? How's it going so far? We'd love for you to let us know next week when we meet on LinkedIn and YouTube and all that stuff. And don't forget to get your questions in early. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/events to find some links to join us live. YouTube, LinkedIn, X, Instagram. There's also a handy form to submit your questions right now. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Annetta for leaving some fantastic feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show, a badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker, a free book, or even a chance to have a one-on-one with me. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book, use the promo code LISTENER, and get 10% off your copy today. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, even episodes before they're released. And you can get instant access to that video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. And if you want to transform your career from fuzzy to focus, make sure to grab UX Playbook's Fast Track Bundle. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the promo code BEYOND for nearly $25 off all those examples, videos, tips, handcrafted by my buddy Chris Wynn. Remember to sign up for the newsletter. Check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. Yeah, absolutely. And oh man, I just had a thought and I just totally forgot what it was.
It can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, the beauty of post. We're fixing
that
post.
is nice.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I thought it was like super insightful. I can't remember.
It probably was, Yeah.
I'll come up with it. I'll fix it. Whatever. We'll put it back. Nobody will know.